She stared at her phone, reading his text for the third time. Drinks with the team tonight. Don't wait up. It was the fourth time this week he'd cancelled their plans at the last minute. 6 months they'd been together, or at least, that's what she thought they were. Together. The coffee shop where they first met felt different now. The warm lighting that once seemed romantic now felt dim and suffocating. She sat across from him, watching as he scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "About what?" "About us. About where this is going." Finally, his eyes met hers, but there was no warmth in them. Just irritation. "What do you mean, where this is going?" "We're hanging out. Having fun." Her heart sank. "Hanging out? We've been seeing each other for 6 months. We spend almost every weekend together. I've met your friends. You have a drawer at my apartment." He leaned back in his chair, a cold smile playing at his lips. "And? That doesn't mean anything. We're just friends who happen to sleep together sometimes." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Friends? You told me you deleted your dating apps." "No," he said, his voice sharp and condescending. "You assumed I did. I never said I was deleting them. I never said we were exclusive." She felt tears prickling at her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him. But we—" "Look," he interrupted, finally putting his phone down but only to check his watch. "I don't know what fantasy you've built up in your head, but I've been clear from the start. No labels, no commitment. If you can't handle that, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore." The casual cruelty in his voice was stunning. This was the same man who had held her during her grandmother's funeral, who had brought her soup when she was sick, who had whispered sweet things in the darkness of her bedroom. Or had she imagined all of that too? "I need to go," she whispered, standing up. He shrugged. "Fine. Text me later if you want to come over this weekend." She didn't text him later. She didn't text him at all. The next 2 weeks were torture. She saw his posts on social media, him at parties, his arm around different women, each one looking more model perfect than the last. In one photo, he was kissing some blonde's cheek. The caption read, "Life's too short to settle down." Her friends rallied around her. "His trash," her best friend said firmly. "You dodged a bullet." But it didn't feel like dodging anything. It felt like being shot. She went through the stages, crying into her pillow, rage cleaning her apartment at 2 a.m., deleting every photo of him from her phone, blocking him on social media. She threw out the drawer full of his things, taking savage pleasure in tossing his expensive cologne into the dumpster. One night, alone in her apartment, she looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Her hair was unwashed. She was wearing sweatpants with holes in them and one of his old t-shirts that she'd missed in her purge. "No," she said aloud to her reflection. "No more." She pulled off his shirt and threw it in the trash. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She opened her laptop and looked at her abandoned dreams. Before him, she'd been saving to take a photography course in Italy. Before him, she'd been training for a marathon. Before him, she'd been working on a portfolio to apply for a promotion at the design firm where she worked. She'd put everything on hold, rearranging her life around someone who saw her as nothing more than convenient company. That night, she made a list. Not of what she'd lost, but of what she was going to gain. At the top, she wrote, "Choose yourself." The transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. She would make sure of it. 3 months after that coffee shop conversation, she barely recognized her own life, in the best possible way. The mornings started differently now. Instead of checking her phone anxiously for messages that never came, she woke at dawn to run. The first week had been brutal. She could barely make it a mile without stopping, gasping for air, questioning why she was putting herself through this. But she kept going. Now, she was up to 5 miles, and the endorphin rush was better than any validation she'd ever gotten from him. Work became her sanctuary. She'd thrown herself into the promotion application with fierce determination. Her portfolio had grown from a few scattered pieces to a comprehensive showcase of her talent. The late nights at the office weren't lonely, they were productive. Empowering. She was finally doing the work she'd always been capable of but had held back from, afraid of outshining him, afraid of taking time away from being available whenever he wanted her. "This is incredible," her supervisor said, flipping through her portfolio during their review meeting. "I didn't know you had this range. The campaign redesign for the Miller account, did you really conceptualize all of this yourself?" She felt a flush of pride. "I did. I've been taking some online courses at night, working on developing my style." "Well, it's paid off. I'm recommending you for the senior designer position." The news should have made her want to share it with someone, to call him and prove that she was worth something. But the urge never came. Instead, she texted her best friend, who responded with a string of celebration emojis and insisted on taking her out for dinner. That dinner changed everything. They went to a new Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place she never would have gone with him. Too expensive, too fancy, he would have said. Too much effort for just dinner. But her friend insisted, and she'd bought herself a new dress for the occasion, a deep emerald green that made her feel elegant and powerful. The restaurant was beautiful, warm lighting, exposed brick walls covered in local art, the scent of fresh basil and garlic filling the air. They were seated near the window, people watching and laughing over a bottle of wine, when a man approached their table. "Excuse me," he said, his accent unmistakably Italian. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice you admiring the photographs on the walls. Are you an artist?" He was tall, with dark curly hair touched with silver at the temples, warm brown eyes, and an easy smile. But more than his looks, there was a kindness in his expression, a genuine interest that made her feel seen rather than surveyed. "I work in design," she said. "But I'm interested in photography. These are beautiful." "I own the restaurant," he explained. "And the gallery upstairs. We showcase local artists. I'm always looking for new talent. Do you have a portfolio?" They talked for 20 minutes. His name was Alessandro, and he'd moved from Rome 5 years ago to open the restaurant. The gallery was his passion project, a way to blend his love of food and art. He was warm, engaging, and when he spoke to her, he maintained eye contact, leaning in slightly, as if what she was saying was the most interesting thing he'd heard all day. Before leaving, he gave her his card. "Think about it. We have an open call for our spring exhibition. I'd love to see your work." Walking home that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: excitement about the future. Not anxiety about the past, not regret about wasted time, but genuine excitement. She began going to the gallery on weekends. Alessandro was often there, and they'd talk about art, about travel, about life. He told her about growing up in Rome, learning to cook from his grandmother. She told him about her dreams of studying photography in Italy, a dream she'd shelved for too long. "Why did you stop?" he asked one afternoon as they stood before a stunning black and white photograph of the Amalfi Coast. "I guess I let someone convince me it wasn't practical, that I should focus on more important things." Alessandro looked at her thoughtfully. "The only person who gets to decide what's important in your life is you." His words stayed with her. She enrolled in a weekend photography intensive. She started carrying her camera everywhere, capturing the city through fresh eyes. Her Instagram, which had been dormant for months, came alive with her work: sunrise over the river, street vendors at the farmer's market, the play of light through autumn leaves. Her follower count started growing. A local magazine reached out about featuring her work. The senior designer position came through. She was becoming the person she'd always been capable of being, the person she'd been before she'd made herself smaller to fit into someone else's life. She hadn't thought about him in weeks. The spring exhibition at Alessandro's gallery was her debut. She'd submitted her work with trembling hands and a racing heart, half expecting rejection. When Alessandro called to tell her she'd been selected, not just included, but featured, she'd nearly dropped the phone. Now, standing in the gallery as servers circulated with wine and hors d'oeuvres, she could barely believe this was her life. 20 of her photographs lined the main wall, each one a piece of the journey she'd taken over the past 8 months. There was Dawn Runner, a self-portrait of her silhouette against a pink sunrise. Empty spaces, the coffee shop where everything had fallen apart, now looking hauntingly beautiful through her lens. And her favorite, Becoming, a series of triptych photos showing a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, which had become the poster image for the exhibition. "You look terrified," Alessandro said, appearing at her elbow with a glass of wine. "Don't be. Your work is extraordinary." "There are so many people here," she whispered. "Yes, and they're all here for the art. Your art." He clinked his glass against hers. "Trust yourself." The evening was surreal. People she'd never met stood before her photographs, discussing them, interpreting them, feeling something from them. A journalist from the city's arts magazine interviewed her. A corporate buyer purchased 3 pieces. Her supervisor from work showed up with half the creative team, beaming with pride. "I knew you had talent," her boss said, "but this is something else. You're not just a designer. You're an artist." Her best friend was there too, of course, documenting everything on her phone, sending updates to their group chat where messages of support and celebration poured in. She was surrounded by love, by people who saw her, who celebrated her, who wanted her to succeed. She was talking to a potential buyer about her process when she felt it, that prickle on the back of her neck that told her someone was watching. She turned, scanning the crowd, and her heart stopped. He was there. Standing near the entrance, he looked exactly the same. Same artfully tousled hair, same expensive casual outfit, same confident posture. But there was something different in his expression as he stared at the exhibition poster with her name on it. Shock. Maybe disbelief. Their eyes met across the room. She saw him register her, not the girl he dismissed in that coffee shop, but this version. Her hair was different, shorter and styled with confidence. She'd lost the weight she'd gained from stress eating during their relationship, not through misery but through health. Her dress was sophisticated, her makeup perfect, her posture straight and proud. She was glowing with success and happiness. She watched his face change as he took it all in, the exhibition with her name, the people clustered around her photographs, the way Alessandro's hand rested casually on her lower back as he leaned in to whisper something that made her laugh. For a moment, she felt panic. All the old feelings threatened to rush back, the hurt, the rejection, the sense of not being enough. But then Alessandro said something else, and she remembered, she was enough. She had always been enough. She excused herself from the conversation and walked toward him. Not because she owed him anything, but because she owed herself the closure of facing him without fear. "Hi," she said simply. He seemed to struggle for words. I saw the exhibition posted online. I didn't realize it was you. Your work it's really good. Thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them. She could see him taking in every detail, her confidence, her success, the evidence that she'd not just survived without him but thrived. "You look amazing," he said finally. "Different. Happy." "I am happy." "Look, about what happened," he started. "It's fine," she interrupted. "Really? It was a long time ago. Maybe we could get coffee sometime? Catch up." There it was. The same pattern, the same casual approach that had worked on her before. But she wasn't the same person anymore. "I don't think so," she said calmly. "But I appreciate you coming to the exhibition." She saw the confusion flash across his face. He wasn't used to rejection. Before he could respond, Alessandro appeared at her side. "There you are," Alessandro said warmly. "The journalist wants one more photo for the magazine spread." He extended his hand to the man. "Alessandro Romano. I own the gallery. Are you enjoying the exhibition?" "Yeah, it's great," he said, shaking Alessandro's hand reluctantly. "I'm an old friend." "How wonderful that you came to support her," Alessandro said with genuine warmth that somehow made the man look smaller. "She's incredibly talented. We're lucky to showcase her work." She felt Alessandro's hand find hers, a gesture of support and solidarity. The contrast between the two men was striking, one who had made her feel insignificant, one who celebrated her significance. "I should go," the man said abruptly. "Congratulations on all this." She watched him leave, weaving through the crowd of people who were there because they valued her work, her talent, her vision. She felt nothing but relief. "Old boyfriend?" Alessandro asked quietly after he'd gone. "Old mistake," she corrected. "But an important one. It taught me what I deserve." Alessandro smiled. "And what do you deserve?" "Everything," she said with certainty. "I deserve everything." He couldn't stop thinking about the exhibition. About her. It had been 3 weeks since that night at the gallery, and the image of her, confident, successful, happy, haunted him. He found himself scrolling through the gallery's website, reading the glowing reviews of her work. The arts magazine had done a full feature on her, calling her an emerging talent to watch. Her Instagram, which he'd checked obsessively in the months after their breakup hoping to see signs of her missing him, was now full of her photography, travel shots from a recent trip to Barcelona, and yes, photos with Alessandro. Dinners, gallery openings, a sunset shot where their silhouettes were close enough to suggest intimacy. He hated it. All of it. His friends had started noticing his distraction. "You good?" his roommate asked one night as he sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at a photo of her laughing at some outdoor cafe. "Yeah, fine. Just thinking." "About that girl from the gallery? Dude, you've been weird since that night." He had been weird. Weirder than he wanted to admit. Because seeing her had cracked something open inside him, a realization he'd been avoiding for almost a year. He missed her. Not the version of her that had sat across from him in that coffee shop, looking at him with hurt in her eyes. He missed the girl who had laughed at his jokes, who had fit perfectly against his side during movie nights, who had looked at him like he was something special. The girl who had been there whenever he wanted her, who had made him feel wanted without demanding anything in return. Except she had demanded something, hadn't she? She demanded to be seen as more than convenient. And he'd thrown it back in her face. The blonde he'd been seeing casually had stopped returning his texts. The brunette he'd met at a bar turned out to be boring, obsessed with her Instagram engagement rates. The redhead had seemed promising until she mentioned she was actually just looking for someone to take her to her ex's wedding. Everyone felt shallow, temporary, unsatisfying. He started showing up at places he thought he might see her. The coffee shop where they used to meet, she never came. The running trail he knew she frequented, he jogged it twice a week now, always looking. He walked past the design firm where she worked, feeling like a stalker but unable to stop himself. Finally, he saw her. Coming out of her office building with her best friend, both of them laughing about something. She looked radiant in professional clothes that screamed success, so different from the casual outfits she'd worn when they were together, always trying to match his laid-back aesthetic. He called out her name before he could stop himself. She turned, and for just a moment, her smile faltered. Then it returned, but cooler, more distant. "Hi. What are you doing here?" "I was in the area. I thought maybe. Could we talk? Get that coffee." Her friend gave him a look that could freeze fire. "We have dinner plans." "It's okay," she said to her friend, then to him, "What do you want to talk about?" "Us. What happened? I've been thinking a lot about." "There is no us," she said gently but firmly. "There hasn't been for almost a year. I know I messed up. But seeing you at the gallery, seeing how amazing you're doing, it made me realize." "Realize what?" Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "That I'm worth your time now that I'm successful? That I'm good enough now that someone else sees value in me?" The accuracy of her words stung. "No, that's not." "Yes, it is," she interrupted. "You're here because I'm not the same girl who was begging for crumbs of your attention. You're here because you can't stand that I'm happy without you. That's not fair." "Fair?" For the first time, real emotion crept into her voice. "You told me we were just friends. You belittled me for wanting more. You paraded other women in front of me like I was supposed to be grateful you gave me any attention at all. And now, because I've built something for myself, because I've found someone who actually values me, suddenly you've been thinking." Her friend put a protective arm around her shoulders. "We're leaving." "Wait, please. I was wrong, Okay? I was an idiot. I took you for granted. But we were good together. We could be good again. She looked at him with something like pity. We were never good together. I was good to you, and you took advantage of that. There's a difference. So that's it. You're with that Italian guy now, and I'm just supposed to accept that. Whether I'm with Alessandro or not is none of your business. But yes, you're supposed to accept that we're over. We've been over. The only person who hasn't accepted it is you, and only because your ego can't handle that I moved on. He felt anger rising. Your ego seems pretty healthy these days. One exhibition and suddenly you're too good for. Don't, she cut him off sharply. Don't you dare try to make me feel small again. That's what you did the whole time we were together, made yourself feel big by making me feel small. I'm done with that. I'm done with you. She turned to leave, and desperation made him grab her arm. Please. Just give me another chance. I'll be different. I'll. Let go of her. Her friend's voice was dangerous. He dropped her arm immediately, suddenly aware of how this looked. How he looked, desperate, pathetic, nothing like the cool, detached person he'd always prided himself on being. She looked at where he'd grabbed her, then at his face. You need to move on. Find someone who wants what you're offering. But it's not going to be me. It's never going to be me again. This time when they walked away, he didn't follow. He stood on the sidewalk, watching her disappear into the evening crowd, and felt the full weight of what he'd lost. Not just her, but who he could have been with her. Who he could have been, period. His phone buzzed. One of the women he'd been casually seeing, asking if he wanted to come over. He stared at the message, feeling nothing. The whole casual thing, the keeping things light, the refusing to commit, it had always been about maintaining control, about keeping the upper hand. But what was the point of having the upper hand in relationships that meant nothing? He thought about her smile at the gallery when she looked at Alessandro. The way she'd glowed with pride talking about her work. The confidence in how she'd walked away from him just now. Not in anger but in certainty that she deserved better. She did deserve better. She'd always deserved better. And he was beginning to realize that he'd given away something irreplaceable because he'd been too arrogant to recognize its value. 6 months after the gallery exhibition, she stood in the arrivals terminal of Leonardo da Vinci Airport in Rome, her camera bag slung over her shoulder and excitement buzzing through her veins. The photography intensive in Italy, the dream she'd shelved for so long, was finally happening. 3 months of studying under master photographers, exploring light and shadow in the eternal city, and yes, spending time in Alessandro's hometown. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully. After the exhibition, he'd asked her to dinner, a real date, he'd specified, no business talk. She'd said yes but insisted on taking things slow. She needed to prove to herself that she could stand on her own, that her happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else. Alessandro had understood. He was patient where the other man had been demanding, consistent where the other had been unreliable, enthusiastic about her success where the other had been threatened by it. When she got the acceptance letter for the photography program in Rome, he'd been the first person she told, and his joy had been genuine and uncomplicated. I have to tell you something, he'd said that night over celebratory wine. I may have, how do you say, talked you up to the program director. He's an old friend. Alessandro, she'd laughed, swatting his arm. Your work spoke for itself, he'd insisted. I just made sure he looked at your portfolio. The rest was all you. Now, as she made her way through customs, her phone buzzed with messages. Her best friend sending encouragement. Her supervisor confirming they'd hold her senior designer position until she returned. Her mom reminding her to take lots of pictures and be safe. And one message that made her pause. Hey, I heard you're in Italy. That's amazing. I'm really happy for you. She stared at the message from him. Over the past months, he'd tried reaching out several times, always casual, always testing the waters, never quite apologizing but never quite leaving her alone either. She'd kept her responses brief and distant. But this message felt different. Less about him, more about her. She typed back, thank you. I hope you're doing well. Then she put her phone away and stepped out into the Roman sunshine. Alessandro was waiting outside, leaning against a vintage Vespa and looking like something out of a movie. When he saw her, his face broke into a wide smile. "Benvenuta," he called out, pulling her into a warm hug. "Welcome to Rome. Are you ready for your adventure?" The next 3 months were transformative. She studied under photographers who challenged her, pushed her, helped her see the world through new eyes. She explored Rome's ancient streets at golden hour, captured the play of light in the Pantheon, photographed vendors at the Campo de Fiori market. Her portfolio grew richer, deeper, more confident. Alessandro introduced her to his family, a loud, loving group who welcomed her with open arms and endless plates of food. His grandmother, Nonna Maria, took a special liking to her, insisting on teaching her to make proper carbonara while sharing stories of Alessandro's childhood. "He's a good boy," Nonna Maria said one afternoon as they rolled pasta dough. "But he's been alone too long. It's nice to see him happy." "I make him happy?" she asked, touched. "You make each other happy," the old woman corrected. "That's how it should be. Equal. My late husband, he used to say love is not about one person filling the empty spaces in another. It's about two whole people choosing to walk the same path." The wisdom stayed with her. She thought about how she'd tried to fill her empty spaces with the wrong person, how she'd contorted herself to fit into his life, and how different it felt with Alessandro. Two whole people, both with full lives, choosing to share them. She was in Venice for a weekend workshop when the news broke. Her phone exploded with messages, all linking to the same article. Her ex had been fired from his job for inappropriate workplace behavior. The details were vague but damning. Patterns of dismissiveness toward female colleagues, casual cruelty disguised as jokes, a refusal to take responsibility when called out. Her first instinct was satisfaction. Then it shifted to something more complex. Sadness for the person he could have been if he'd been willing to grow, gratitude that she'd gotten away when she did, and finally, a deep sense of closure. She called her best friend. "Did you see?" Everyone saw. It's all over social media. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, surprised to realize it was true. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm grateful. Grateful. That I found out who he was when I did. That I left. That I rebuilt my life. If he'd treated me better, I might have stayed, and I never would have become this person." "Look at you, all wise and evolved," her friend teased. "Italy looks good on you." It did. Everything looked good on her these days. On her last night in Rome before flying home, Alessandro took her to the Trevi Fountain at sunset. They stood among the tourists, watching the water sparkle in the golden light. "I'm going to miss you," he said, taking her hand. "I'll be back," she promised. "And you're coming to visit next month, remember?" "I remember. But still." He pulled out a small box. "I wanted to give you something to remember this time." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a camera. "Alessandro," she whispered, touched. "You came here chasing a dream you'd given up on," he said. "You took a risk. You chose yourself. That's worth celebrating." She threw her arms around him, this man who saw her clearly and celebrated her fully, who wanted her to succeed and never felt diminished by her success. "Make a wish," he said, nodding toward the fountain. She closed her eyes and tossed a coin into the water. But she didn't wish for anything to be different. For the first time in her life, everything was exactly as it should be. 3 years later, she stood in a much larger gallery in New York, a solo exhibition of her work titled Becoming, A Journey in Light and Shadow. The photographs spanned her transformation, from those early uncertain shots to the confident, breathtaking images she'd captured in Italy and beyond. Her ex wasn't invited, but she heard through mutual friends that he'd seen the coverage in the New York Times art section. He'd apparently told someone he was happy for her, that he always knew she had talent. The comments made her smile, not with bitterness, but with the amused detachment of someone who had moved so far beyond that chapter that it felt like a story about someone else. Alessandro stood beside her, now her partner in every sense of the word. Her family was there, her friends, her colleagues. The gallery was packed with people who celebrated her, supported her, loved her. During her speech that evening, she said, "A few years ago, someone told me I should focus on more practical things than art. That my dreams weren't important. I believed him for a while. But then I realized the only person who gets to decide what's important in my life is me. This exhibition is for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough, who's ever been made to feel small. You are enough. You always were. Sometimes you just need to walk away from people who can't see it to discover it for yourself." The applause was thunderous. Later, as she mingled with collectors and critics and people who valued her work, she felt the ghost of her old self, that girl in the coffee shop, watching with pride. She'd promised herself she'd choose herself, and she had. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had happened, and it was permanent. The girl who had been dismissed, belittled, and treated as an option had become a woman who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who walked away from anything less than she deserved. And she had never been happier.